Okay, wow. All right, I just want to start by saying, again, a huge thank you to you guys here at Bethlehem for letting me learn in this space, and just the prayers and encouragement and financial help has been so huge for my family going through this whole crazy seminary experience. So thank you for being not only my home church, and as you'll see in my story, a place where my faith has really grown, but also a place to continue that and hopefully go out and serve another congregation like you guys have helped me. Also, thank you to Pastor Tom. He has been an awesome mentor in this crazy year of staff transition where he had 1,000,001 things that he could be doing and really set aside very valuable time to help me learn and help me grow in my studies. So thank you. And just like I said to these kids up here, I think it is of the utmost importance that we call out the ministry gifts in each other. So I just want to share a gift that goes very unnoticed that Pastor Tom has that we're super lucky to have, which is visitation. And it's something that goes very unnoticed, but for those people who can't walk through those doors on a Sunday morning, visitation is so beautiful. And I've really appreciated getting to see that gift of yours in place. So thank you. Okay. Sorry. 2 things I want to say before I start. Number 1, I'm still very new at this. I know I talk kind of fast sometimes, and I know I'm kind of all over the place at other times. So bear with me. In my story, I hope that you are open and curious about what I have to say. Hopefully that I would be in to return with how God works in your life. So I encourage you to do that. Number 2, I believe that we are all called to be ministers, and so by no way do I want to stand up here and tell you a story of the way that I think I should go into ministry or the way that I feel God is working in my life to discourage anyone else from feeling that you are just as called to share the gospel, share the good news, and the love of Christ in other people's lives. So thank you for letting me share, but I hope it opens it up for other people to share the ways that God works in your life. So I'm going to kind of tell you my story in 2 pieces. The first piece being my groundings of faith, basically the way Bethlehem really moved me in my faith formation, but also college and friends and family. And then the second piece I want to share with you is my quote-unquote call story, or what I say is the 3 conversations I had that pushed me into ministry. So first, for my groundings in faith. I grew up in this church, if anyone didn't know that. All of my best friends went to this church. Basically every single one of them. It was a social gathering. I came here in the beginning because I had a lot of friends here. It was a lot of fun. There was a lot of adults who cared deeply about me, and I noticed that. And so I was here. I loved coming here. Another way that my parents got me here quite a bit, especially on Sunday mornings, was there was a rule in our house that we always went out to eat after church on Sundays, which was awesome. My family is very encouraged with food. But the rule was, if you don't come to church on Sunday, you don't get to go out to eat. You have to stay home. That got me to church a lot of Sunday mornings. It really did. But by no means were we the perfect church family. We missed for sporting events. We were all over the place or whatever. But we were grounded when we were here. We were going to church, and that was really important to me and really important to my family. Another thing that was so grounding in my faith formation here at Bethlehem was the youth pastors and youth directors that were here through the time of me growing up. I like to say that they made a huge impact in my life, but I also want to note that the biggest experiences that God moved in my life were outside of these walls. They were on mission trips and youth gatherings and different outings and whatnot, where I like to say I truly experienced the gospel before I could ever put it into words. And that was seeing the love that other people had for me. So, I loved church growing up. It was important to me. There were ups and downs. I don't want to make it a fairy tale picture. I had a lot of questions. I was a very inquisitive, 7th, 8th, and 9th grade girl, a very stubborn 7th, 8th, and 9th grade girl that wanted to know some answers. There aren't a lot of answers, besides a lot of love and grace in these buildings and in these walls. But I had a few people growing up that said, You ever thought about going into ministry? No, never. Just a couple of people maybe mentioned it in passing, and my response was, sorry, Pastor Tom, pastors are a little weird. They're awesome people, but they have a label, they have a pressure, they have weight on their shoulders, and in no way, shape, or form did I want that at all. Not at all. I went through high school, not really knowing my after-school plans. I knew I was going to go to University of Minnesota Duluth for my studies. Besides that, I knew I wanted a major in psychology, and I had to pair it with one other major. I didn't know what that was going to be. So I went off to UMD, and I went off after a summer where I went on a very transformative mission trip through this church, through YouthWorks. We went to South Dakota, a Native American reservation in South Dakota called Standing Rock, and there I just more deeply fell into my faith, and I more deeply saw how God was working in my life and calling me to love others in this life I have. So I went off to college, definitely not going to be a pastor, but really, really in love with my faith. Really, really in love with what God was doing in my life. So I went off to UMD. After this mission trip experience, I was like, God, we have a really good thing going here. How can you help me through college? Because I've heard that these are like the troublesome years and whatnot. So I got to college. I basically joined every group that had Christian in its title. I thought that could help. That would do the trick. So I got involved with Young Life. I got involved with Cru, formerly Christian Crusaders. I got involved with the Catholic group on campus. I was sometimes going to daily mass in between my classes. I got involved with Lutheran campus ministries, with their worship services during the week. I actually ended up joining, I don't know if I should admit this, but I joined a first Lutheran up in Duluth as a full member in my college years, which was a beautiful place. And all of these places were just beautiful spaces where God was really impacting my life and really calling me to love my neighbor and serve others. And it was awesome. I felt really in tune with God, really in tune with my faith. But that was over here, okay? And me choosing a major, me choosing my career, me choosing what I wanted to do in life was way over there. And there was a strong wall in the middle, a wall of my control and everything that I did not want to connect those two. So that kind of leads into my call story. So like I said, my call story is the combination of 3 different conversations, okay? So this goes into my sophomore year of college. My sophomore year of college comes around, and my mother comes up to Duluth for a long weekend in the fall where we were camping up the beautiful shore of Lake Superior up north. And we had made a fire. We were sitting out around the fire late into the evening underneath these beautiful stars, like could not get any more immersed in God's beautiful creation. And my mom asked the very stereotypical question, well, what are you going to do after you graduate? What are you going to do? What are you going to major in? So I said, well, Mom, I already have this major in psychology. I know I'm going to pair it with something else, maybe biology or, social sciences or teaching or something like that. And I said I could go on to counseling. I could work for a nonprofit. The options are just endless when they really weren't endless for the degrees I chose. But she looks back at me after I babbled on for a long time about what I was going to do. She looks back at me. She says, do you ever ask God what you're supposed to do? No. My exact words were, no, because I think God wants me to be a pastor, and I don't want to do that. This whole time, I had inklings. I was so involved in my faith. I just really loved the church. I had a passion for the church, and I could feel that welling up inside of me, but there was this immense wall in between what I was going to do, what I had control of my life, and my faith. And as you all know, that's not how we live as Christians. And so as soon as I said that sentence to my mom, like, I think he wants to be a pastor, but I'm not doing that, the floodgates just opened. It wasn't like I had turned around and I was definitely not all in. No. But I began getting curious, very curious about seminary, very curious about this life of a pastor, very curious about, at the end of the day, what does a pastor do? So, this whole sophomore year, I spent a lot of time in what you say, quote-unquote, discernment. Basically, my discernment was, God, I'm not doing this. And God coming into my life and showing me how. Are you sure? You maybe don't want to try? Anyways, through this year, sophomore year, I signed up for a mission trip for the summer after my sophomore year. It was a mission trip through a Catholic Bible study I had joined that was for all female athletes. So there was like 7 of us going on this trip down to Volcan, Panama. And we were going to, it was a sports-based trip. It was sounding like it was going to be awesome, super fun. We were going to run some sports camps for these kids down there and really get immersed in our faith and the culture. So the leader of this Bible study that I was in said, she was a Catholic missionary on campus. She said, God reveals God's self to people that put themselves in these situations of immense service. So she challenged us. She said, ask God to reveal himself in some way that you need. Ask him a question. Ask him something that you need revealed. Okay. So I asked him. I kind of demanded God a little bit. I said, before going on this trip, I said, if I'm supposed to be a pastor, you better make it very clear, or else I can't do it. That was my honest answer. I can't do it if I don't really think that that's what you're calling me to do. So God did that. We went down to this trip, and through this couple weeks, God truly revealed himself to me and really flipped around my heart for service for the church. And in one of those ways, he flipped around my heart because I was the only non-Catholic on this mission trip, and it was an awesome experience. And we got the opportunity to worship twice a day for 2 weeks. At both of these worships, we celebrated Holy Communion, and I was just not really invited to that table, being the only non-Catholic. And that gave me a whole different understanding for the mercy and forgiveness of God, for what that means. Really flipped around my heart. So, really being in tune with that forgiveness and mercy and understanding of communion and really asking God to reveal himself to me, I could not deny it any longer. But I was like, yeah, God, I think I'm supposed to be a pastor. But I can't do it. I don't think so. I can't do it. So that was my second conversation between God and I on this trip. The third conversation I had in my call story was down in Volcan, Panama. We were in an hour of holy prayer or adoration in the morning, and we had 2 Catholic priests with us for this trip. One was named Father Brendan, and he was in this really small, rundown, beautiful chapel in a field in Panama with us, praying, leading us in silent prayer. And then the other priest was Father John, and he was sitting outside, and he was taking confession for people on the trip, which I opted out of very quickly, being the Lutheran on the trip. So I was in this hour of holy prayer in the morning, and I basically was telling God all the reasons I couldn't do this, all my opt-out, all my reasons. It's not for me, it's not for me. I know you're making me do it, but it's not for me. And from the back of the room, Father Brendan, in this hour of silent prayer, we don't speak in the hour of silent prayer, he says from the back of the room, there is someone here who needs to spend Father John's time outside, not for confession, but for a life decision. Okay. Well, I look around at my teammates. Some of my basketball teammates were also on this trip with me. And I'm basically eyeing them up like, who told him? Because I had shared with them, I was kind of feeling these feelings. Nothing. They were praying. They were just praying away. So I got up out of my chair. I went outside. I sat down with Father John and almost immediately just burst into tears. Was just explaining to him what I felt and what was going on and everything. And this Catholic priest had this beautiful conversation with me about how he also could see that I could be called into this ministry in a different way. When he so easily, like our gospel message, could have been a religious leader that said, no thanks. So the third conversation, the actual short version, it all welled up into this one phrase that I said to Father John. I said, I'm not good enough to do this. And he said, no one's good enough to do what God's calling him or her to do. More deeply than ever, I understood the gospel a little bit more in that moment. Because all leading up into this, it was all about, if I could do it, if I was going to be good enough, if I could hold up this position or this stature. And God came in and said, no, you say yes, and I go with you. I help you do this. So that was the third and final conversation in my call story. Came back from the trip, and it was a 180 flip. And anytime someone asked, what are your plans after school? Oh, I think I'm going to join seminary. You're going to seminary. And God just so completely took this girl who said, no way, God, no way, and said, no, I can do it, and God's going to go with me because I'm not going to be good enough for it. But that's okay, because God's there with me every step of the way. So, I know that kind of leaves it in this weird, pretty little picture, but my story continues after that. It's not done in those three conversations, and it has many more twists and turns and ups and downs, like I'm sure every single one of our stories does as well. But thank you for letting me share. Thank you for being open to insight a little bit more on why I'm doing this. And like I said before, I really, really do hope that it only encourages all of you to share your story with me or with anyone or those around you, because there's one thing I'm really certain of, that God's with you through that story. So, if you would all bow your heads and pray with me, that would be wonderful. Lord, I thank you for calling us by name, for knowing us more deeply than we can ever imagine. We thank you for the unique and wonderful gifts you give each and every one of us. Let us listen to the ways you are calling us to use all that you have given for you. And let us be a community that lifts up the gifts we see in one another for all of your goodness and all of your glory. Amen. Thank you. Oh, there we go.